In a world filled with towering skyscrapers, where every decision has the power to alter the fate of thousands, have you ever wondered, do those at the very top truly understand the struggles of ordinary workers? Or has everything been reduced to cold, impersonal numbers, where a person's worth is measured only by figures on paper and the dry reports of the financial system? Today, I invite you to follow the journey of David Weston, a CEO whose story goes far beyond numbers. It is a story of dreams, ideals, and the extraordinary challenges he must face when he embarks on a secret mission that will turn everything upside down. David Weston is not just the founder of the nation's largest financial institution. He is a man who vowed that the Weston Financial Group would never discriminate against customers based on their skin color, social status, or wealth. He built this empire from the ground up, inspired by the pain his own family once endured, denied a loan solely because of their skin color, in a society where prejudice still lurked beneath the surface. But do ideals truly survive in a world where discrimination continues to silently thrive? One afternoon, as David stepped into a small convenience store in his old neighborhood, he overheard a conversation that would change everything for him. Even Weston turned me down, claiming they serve the community. I brought every document they asked for, tax returns, business plan, collateral, and they still rejected me. Then I saw a white man walking right after me, and they approved his loan in less than half the time. It's always the same, a voice said, heavy with frustration. David froze, still holding the carton of milk in his hand, unable to believe what he was hearing. His own bank, the institution he had poured his heart and soul into, was the very subject of this painful conversation. Slowly, he placed the milk into his basket, pretending to browse the items on the nearby shelves. What he heard next only deepened the growing turmoil inside him. Weston was supposed to be different, supposed to be fair, a second voice continued. But it's all just marketing to make white folks feel good about where they put their money. Nothing's really changed. David's chest tightened, the words hitting him like a punch to the gut. The very bank he had built to fight against such discrimination was now, in these eyes, perpetuating the very prejudices it was meant to dismantle. He was confronted with a painful truth. His organization was failing at the mission he had set for it. Then came a decision that would change everything. David would go undercover, disguised as an ordinary customer, someone from a modest background, to experience firsthand how his bank treated people, especially people of color, across the counter. In the days that followed, David meticulously transformed his appearance. He sought out a professional makeup artist to alter his looks, change his posture, and dressed in simple clothing, far removed from his usual expensive suits. He wanted to feel the raw truth, without the shield of his identity. And so, David Williams, his new persona, was born. A man with the same financial acumen as David Weston, but who would live the reality of bias and discrimination that many others faced every day. David Williams walked into the main branch of Weston Financial wearing an ill-fitting suit, holding a small business loan application, and carrying the heavy weight of what he was about to uncover. This would not be an ordinary loan meeting. No. This was a crucial test that would reveal whether the values of fairness and equality that David Weston had built his empire upon were still alive within its walls. What followed would be a journey to uncover the truth about whether the ideals he had once set in place still thrived within the very institution he had so painstakingly built. David Williams stepped into the main branch of Weston Financial Group, a place where just hours earlier he had stood as David Weston, the CEO of this very bank. But today, he was not the man at the top, not wearing a sharp suit or carrying an air of authority. He was just an ordinary customer, dressed in khakis, a plain shirt, and worn-out leather shoes. He felt every step heavy beneath him, as if he were walking into an entirely different world, one where he no longer held power or commanded respect. As he entered, the atmosphere shifted immediately. Just as he had feared, not a single word of welcome. Samantha, the receptionist he had known well, did not recognize him at all. She glanced at David with a blank, indifferent look and offered only a cold, clipped question, "What do you need?" That question felt like an invitation to indifference rather than the respectful greeting he had always envisioned when he built Weston Financial. David calmly raised his hand and provided his information. "I have an appointment to discuss a business loan. My name is David Williams." Without hesitation, Samantha glanced down at her computer and continued her work without a second thought. No warm greeting, no polite invitation like he had seen extended to other customers so many times before. In fact, she carelessly handed him a form to fill out without even bothering to explain the schedule or provide any guidance. All he could do was quietly sit down in the waiting area, clutching the form in his hands, filled with anxiety and unease. He couldn't help but wonder, is this really what I thought it was? As he sat there, his eyes unintentionally fell upon a young black couple seated across from him. They were waiting, too, hands full of documents, waiting for the recognition they had probably been hoping for far too long. Their tired, disheartened expressions struck a deep chord in David's heart. He realized that he was not the only one facing this. Moments later, a group of middle-aged white customers entered the branch. Not long after, they were warmly greeted, swiftly invited into private offices with bright smiles and enthusiastic welcomes. This only made the reality of discrimination unfolding before David even clearer. He sat there, observing every action, every glance from the bank employees, details he had never noticed before. Time passed. Over 20 minutes had gone by since he arrived. White customers who came in after him were being helped immediately, while he and the young couple continued to wait. Despite having provided all the necessary documents, simply because he wasn't dressed in expensive attire or driving a luxury car parked outside, he was overlooked, treated as if he didn't exist. A voice from one of the offices caught his attention. Another employee named Derek was cheerfully chatting with a white male customer about the various loan packages they could offer. The way they interacted, the friendliness, the attentiveness, the genuine engagement, made the discrimination unmistakably clear. This was something David had never imagined happening within his own bank. He had built Weston Financial from a single, unwavering idea: to provide fair financial opportunities to everyone, regardless of race or social status. And now, here he was witnessing the failure of that very ideal. When it was finally David's turn to be called into the office, he noticed that Derek's demeanor had completely changed. Gone was the enthusiasm, the attentiveness shown to the white customer before. Derek glanced over David's paperwork with apathy, flipping through the documents without genuine attention to the details presented. David saw the doubt in Derek's eyes, clear and unmistakable. A wave of discomfort washed over him, but he kept his composure. He patiently waited and began answering Derek's questions calmly. Even though he knew his application was flawless and there was no reason for it to be rejected, he could feel the palpable injustice in the air. Derek, despite his expertise, showed no real interest in the thorough documents David had prepared. He was merely looking for an excuse to decline David's loan. The worst moment came when Derek asked a seemingly routine question, but with a dismissive tone. "What line of business are you in?" he asked, glancing at David's paperwork with thinly veiled disinterest. "I provide supply chain solutions for small and medium enterprises," David replied. At this, Derek barely looked up, skimmed through the documents carelessly, and muttered an empty remark. "This all seems a bit too idealistic." David looked Derek straight in the eye and decided he would not let this pass. He knew this was not just unprofessionalism, but a clear sign of bias. Anger simmered inside him, yet he maintained his composure. At that moment, he decided it was time to act. "Derek, may I ask you something?" David spoke up, his eyes now shining with firm resolve. Derek looked at him, trying to maintain his indifferent facade, but a flicker of unease crossed his eyes. "Can you explain to me," David asked, his voice calm, yet razor-sharp, "why I feel like I'm being discriminated against, right here in my own bank?" The question struck Derek like a slap in the face, leaving him momentarily speechless. In that instant, David realized he had stepped into a battle that only truth could resolve. But there was more to this story, more events yet to unfold, emotions yet to surface, and challenges still awaiting him. One thing was certain: He would not let this end without making a change. David couldn't sit still throughout his conversation with Derek. A growing sense of helplessness and disappointment welled up inside him every time he realized that the bank he had founded was betraying the very ideals he had once set forth. He knew he couldn't just sit and wait. He had to act, and he had to act now. But he couldn't allow his emotions to take over. He had to stay sharp and seize every opportunity to uncover the truth behind everything that was happening. It felt like a shattered puzzle piece in David's mind as he faced Derek's indifference and dismissive words. This was no longer just about a loan. It had become a confrontation where his honor and ideals were on the line. He saw himself, his perseverance, his years of hard work, being dismissed right in the very place he had built with his own hands. As Derek continued flipping through David's documents without so much as a flicker of interest, a quiet but powerful anger began to rise within David. He decided he would not allow himself to be humiliated any further. He knew that if things continued like this, the legacy he had built would never change. He had to do something to open everyone's eyes, and perhaps most importantly, his own. David took a deep breath, struggling to steady himself. This was not the time to let emotions run wild. Derek, I've completed every document the bank has requested. Why have I been waiting over 30 minutes while others who arrived after me were served immediately? His voice remained gentle, but the tension in every word was unmistakable. Derek, failing to detect the growing storm beneath David's calm question, glanced at the file and lazily replied, "We just need more time to evaluate." David stared at him, unwavering. Then, "May I ask you a question? Do you know who I am?" His eyes suddenly sharpened. Derek looked at David, his expression still blank, as if dealing with someone utterly unimportant. "Absolutely not," he answered coldly. And then, in a blink, David made the decision to remove the mask he had carefully worn all morning. He could no longer tolerate the falsehood unfolding before him. David slowly removed the fake glasses he had been wearing all day, then peeled away the false eyebrows. Derek and the other employees in the room stared at him, unable to believe what they were seeing. In an instant, David's appearance had completely transformed. He rose to his feet, straightened his shirt, and declared, "My name is David Weston. I am the founder and CEO of Weston Financial, and I am here to witness firsthand what is happening inside my bank." Silence flooded the room. The employees could not believe what they had just heard. A thick, suffocating stillness settled over them, but beneath it, a rising fear began to take hold in every heart. With the truth laid bare, David could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Derek, who had once treated him with such indifference, now looked flustered. His face changed color rapidly, from pale to flushed red, then back to ashen white. Everything happened so quickly that Derek was left scrambling to react. David took a deep breath. "I have witnessed discrimination in my own bank, a place where I have poured my heart and soul, built to help those in need, to break down financial barriers. But today, I saw a stark difference in how customers were treated, and I will not allow this to continue." The tension in the room grew unbearable. Fear was thick in the air. The employees began to realize they were not merely facing an internal inspection by their CEO, but a battle over the very dignity and ethics of the bank they served. David continued, his voice calm but filled with strength. "This discrimination doesn't just stem from lower-level employees. It comes from those at the top. You've allowed your personal biases to influence your work. The bank I built was never meant to serve one class of people. It was meant to serve everyone, regardless of race, background, or wealth." Derek, now stripped of all confidence, tried to defend himself. I was just following procedure. I didn't mean to discriminate." But those words could not conceal the truth David had seen so clearly. David stood directly across from Derek, his face unreadable. "The facts speak for themselves. And today, you will be held accountable for your actions." At last, David pulled out his phone and dialed a direct line to the executive floor of Weston Financial. This was the moment everything erupted. Within minutes, Eleanor Matthews, the bank's executive vice president and David's trusted colleague of 15 years, arrived at the branch. What happened next would remain an unforgettable moment in Weston Financial's history. Eleanor entered the room with a commanding presence, completely unshaken. She immediately informed the staff that Derek and several others in the bank would be terminated effective immediately. She didn't need to say much. The heavy silence in the room spoke volumes. David turned back to face Derek, his gaze steady. "Derek, I do not want to see behavior like this ever again. You have tarnished the values we worked so hard to build. And today, you will pay the price for what you've done." He then looked around at the rest of the staff, his eyes serious. "I will not allow my bank to become this kind of place. From today onward, we will change, not just to do what is right, but to protect the values I set forth from the very beginning." After the shocking decisions were made, the atmosphere inside the bank turned suffocating. Everyone in the office was used to routine procedures and tense meetings, but never before had they witnessed such a dramatic upheaval. Everything had happened so fast, and it seemed people were beginning to realize they were not just facing a policy change, but a cultural revolution within the entire bank. David was no longer the calm, gentle man he once was. He had shed the outward image of power that those around him were so accustomed to seeing, but in its place, he had become the embodiment of resilience and resolve. No one could deny that today, in this very room, he had changed everything. True to his promise, following the sudden dismissals and personnel changes, David convened an emergency meeting with all the staff at the branch. The air was still tense, but this time, it wasn't the tension of fear, it was the anticipation of a sweeping reform. During the meeting, David stood at the head of the executive table, his gaze locking onto each employee. "We have failed," he admitted. "I didn't see this before, but today it's clear to me. Our bank has strayed far from its original mission. We can no longer deny the reality that discrimination has crept into our lending practices." Every word David spoke carried weight, and the room grew solemn. All eyes were fixed on him, not just as a leader who spoke of change, but as a leader who was taking action to make it happen. Starting the very next day, David and Eleanor Matthews rolled out a series of reforms. One of the most significant was the mystery shopper program. Customers would be sent to various branches to test the lending process. They would carry identical loan applications, differing only in skin color, race, or background. The goal was to evaluate whether customers were being treated equally. David also ordered the formation of a special oversight committee on lending equity, a newly established panel comprised of individuals with integrity and an unwavering commitment to justice. "We are not only changing this system," David declared, "but we are changing the mindset of those who work within it. To create real change, we must begin with ourselves." Though he knew the road ahead would not be easy, David remained steadfast. Challenges continued to arise, and some of the old employees resisted, even attempting to sabotage the efforts of new staff. But David never lost faith in the path he had chosen. Over the following weeks, meaningful change began to take hold. Customers seeking loans no longer felt discriminated against. They no longer worry about being rejected because of factors beyond their financial standing. Training programs on equity were implemented, and slowly, bank employees began to shift their attitudes. With unwavering determination and professional integrity, David led the entire bank to reevaluate its original purpose. A bank is not just a place where customers get loans. It is a place where they feel fairness and respect. During one of his branch inspections, David noticed a profound transformation. The story of the bank was no longer just a story of numbers or profit margins. It had become a story of fairness and trust, a living testament to what true leadership could achieve. One of the moments that filled David with the greatest pride was when he received feedback from a group of customers who had previously been denied loans. They came to meet him at his office, expressing heartfelt gratitude for the changes the bank had made. "We thank you not only for rebuilding this bank," one customer said, "but for rebuilding our faith in the financial system." Their words were deeply moving, fueling David's determination to continue restoring the values he had once feared were lost. In the end, after months of relentless effort, the reforms David implemented not only transformed the bank, but also set an example for the entire financial industry. Weston Financial was no longer just a name in the sector. It had become a symbol of fairness and equal opportunity for all. Standing at the helm of his institution, David was no longer just a powerful CEO. He was a true leader, driven by passion and responsibility. He understood that change is never easy, but sometimes those very challenges are the key to unlocking a brighter, more just future for everyone. The new vision for Weston Financial was beginning to spread. The reforms David had set in motion were not only impacting the internal workings of the bank, but were also creating powerful ripples throughout the community and the financial industry. He didn't just want to build a fair bank. He wanted to set an example for other financial institutions to follow and learn from. Even though significant changes had been made, the journey was far from over, and David knew this was only the beginning. He had realized that true change must come from within, from the way every employee at the bank understood and lived by the company's core values: fairness, respect, and equality. However, not everyone at the bank welcomed these changes. Internal debates grew increasingly heated. Some longtime employees, accustomed to the old ways, began to feel uneasy. They feared that the new policies would strip away the privileges they had previously enjoyed. Negative reactions escalated, and at times, they turned into outright challenges to David's authority. But David stood firm. He knew that change was never easy, and to achieve what he envisioned, he had to be ready to face any resistance, even from trusted colleagues. He understood that true courage must be tested, and no one could succeed without the strength to stand up against injustice. To set an example, David decided to involve himself personally in the hiring process and the retraining of his staff. He did not wait for his subordinates to implement the changes. Instead, he participated in every workshop, every training session, ensuring that employees deeply understood the value of fairness and how to treat customers without bias toward race or background. One morning, during an important training session, David stood before a crowd of employees, his eyes steady yet filled with encouragement. "You might not see it right now," he began, "but what we're doing today will make a profound difference for generations to come. We're not just a bank. We are agents of change, impacting the lives of thousands. And we will never achieve that by discriminating." David's words resonated deeply. The changes were now unstoppable. He had taken irreversible steps, paving the way for a brighter future where everyone could find equal opportunity without fear of discrimination. Yet for David, every day remained a challenge. He could still feel the resistance from some within the bank, those who doubted the transformation. They had worked for years under the old system and believed these reforms were merely temporary experiments. But David remained resolute, knowing that changing people's mindsets would be a long and arduous journey. Despite the ongoing challenges, David never allowed them to weaken his resolve. He continued to share his story of how his own parents had been denied a loan because of the color of their skin. That was the very reason he had built this bank in the first place. He reminded everyone that no matter how successful the bank became, if it failed to uphold the core values it was founded on, that success would be nothing but a hollow lie. And then, after many months of relentless effort, the first signs of real change began to emerge. One day, while visiting a branch, David overheard a conversation between a customer and an employee. The customer, a middle-aged woman, was thanking the bank employee for the respectful and fair treatment she had received during her loan application. "Thank you for not discriminating against me and for treating me as an equal customer," she said. Those words, coming from a customer who had once been turned away by other banks, were among the greatest encouragement David could ever receive. He knew then that the changes were starting to make a real impact, and it was proof that, no matter how difficult the journey, his work was making a difference. David did not allow himself to rest. He continued to push policies forward, to drive reforms, and to confront challenges that many would have shied away from. He understood that the road ahead remained long, and no meaningful change ever came without resistance. But what mattered most was that he had taken the first steps. He had ignited the flame of hope for a fairer bank. a place where every customer could receive equal opportunities, regardless of their race, background, or financial status. As all the reforms David had implemented began to gain attention, a wave of rapid transformation started to take shape at Weston Financial. Every step he took seemed to create a powerful push, not only reshaping the way the bank operated, but also beginning to change the entire financial industry. David knew that real change would never come easily. Some branches still repeated the discriminatory and unfair practices he was working so hard to eliminate. Yet, what he witnessed was a growing wave of feedback from the community and customers alike. Clients who had previously suffered discrimination in the lending process were now speaking up, demanding their rightful treatment. One morning, a middle-aged woman who had been denied a loan for unclear reasons called David. Her voice trembled with emotion. "I just wanted to thank you. Your bank has changed my life. We're no longer judged by appearances. I never imagined that one day I could receive a loan I truly deserve." This brought David a deep sense of relief. He knew that his decisions were making a genuine difference for customers the bank had once overlooked. But resistance, as expected, remained unavoidable. Longtime employees, especially those who had grown accustomed to personal gains under the old policies, began to show clear signs of dissatisfaction. Some even started working negligently, refusing to follow the changes David had put in place. Internal tensions mounted, and certain branches emerged as hotspots of negativity toward the new audits and inspections. Yet David did not waver. He knew that true change always came with resistance. He also understood that every employee at the bank needed to realize they were not just working for a company. They were contributing to building a fairer future for all. One of the major breakthroughs came when David noticed that some employees had begun to shift their perspectives. Sarah, a long-standing loan officer who had previously maintained a neutral stance toward the reforms, had become a shining example in embracing the new policies. She began working closely with clients, showing empathy and truly listening to their needs. One day, as she welcomed a small family seeking a loan, she took the initiative to guide them carefully through the entire application process. "I know you're worried about not qualifying," she told them, "but let me help you because I believe this is your chance." Sarah's words inspired the entire loan department, and gradually, more staff began to follow her lead. This not only made clients feel respected, but also restored their trust in the system David had fought to rebuild. Transformation became increasingly evident across every department. New training programs on discrimination and fairness were no longer just theoretical, they were being actively applied in daily work. Cross-departmental meetings became more open, with employees beginning to discuss ways to ensure fairness for every customer. David personally met with key staff members who had embraced the changes, encouraging and motivating them to continue spreading this new spirit. "You've done an excellent job," he told them during one meeting. "Real change doesn't come just from my decisions. It comes from your actions. You are the ones building a stronger, fairer bank." Then, what David had long hoped for finally happened. Former customers began returning to Weston Financial, this time with renewed trust. No longer did they feel anxious or fearful when walking into the bank. Instead, they felt reassured, knowing they would be treated fairly. Everything seemed to be moving toward the vision David had held for so long. One returning client was the Johnson family, who had once been denied a loan when they needed funds to buy a home. This time, they came back not only with a new loan application, but also with deep respect and gratitude for the bank. They thanked David for giving them the opportunity to change their lives. It had been over a month since David's reforms had begun to show real results. Everything was gradually settling, and Weston Financial had now become a shining example of fairness and transparency in the banking industry. Yet, just when things seemed to be finally calm, an unexpected event occurred, one that would change everything once again. One weekend morning, as David was reviewing financial reports in his office, his phone suddenly rang. On the screen appeared a name he never expected to see: Derek Thompson, the man he had previously removed from the bank. David could hardly believe his eyes. While he had been working tirelessly to rebuild the bank from the wreckage left by discrimination, A call from the very man who had once insulted him now appeared on his screen. "David, I made a terrible mistake." Derek's voice came through the phone, thick with emotion. "I hurt not just you, but thousands of other customers as well. I want to apologize. And if possible, I hope you might give me a chance to make things right." David paused, staring at the numbers on his computer screen, feeling as though everything was circling back to where it had all begun. He knew that forgiveness was never easy, but deep down, David also understood that no one could change without being given the opportunity to make amends. He replied in a firm, yet measured voice, "I don't know if you can ever fully repair the harm you've done, but the chance will only come if you work with genuine sincerity and true responsibility. Life is not always fair, but it is courageous decisions made in difficult times that bring about great change." After David Weston revealed his true identity and publicly exposed the discrimination he had faced within his own bank, the changes did not stop at just one branch. They swept across all of Weston Financial. It was a shocking revelation for the entire staff, as they realized they were not merely working at a bank, but were part of something much larger, a mission to create equal opportunity for everyone, regardless of background or skin color. The employees, even those who had spent many years at the bank, were forced to confront the very values they had been taught, values that had long been eroded. They came to understand that career advancement, professional success, and even the future of the bank itself could not survive without a foundation of fairness, where every customer, no matter who they were, would be treated equally. David did not stop at restoring his own dignity. He took a series of decisive actions to reestablish the bank's core values. He mandated that every employee undergo intensive training on fairness in banking, launched a stricter evaluation system for loan quality, and created a new oversight committee, one that included representatives of all backgrounds, regardless of race or social class. In just a single day, Weston Financial was completely transformed. What seemed like simple decisions turned out to produce astonishing results. David didn't stop at reforming lending policies. He also ensured that employees themselves were treated fairly, not only in their work, but in every aspect of their professional relationships. As David's story spread, customers who had once been denied loans because of discrimination returned with newfound trust. They saw that not only had Weston Financial changed, but the entire banking industry was taking a pivotal step toward recognizing and respecting its customers. In the end, as David looked back on the journey he had taken, he felt a deep pride in knowing he had not only changed the lives of those around him, but had also helped build a more just future for all. His path from a powerful CEO to a courageous man confronting his own organization's failings became a lesson not only in leadership, but also in bravery and unwavering commitment to human values. The greatest lesson from this story is clear. No matter where we stand in society, fairness and mutual respect are the most valuable principles of all. When we dare to stand up for them, we do not only change our own lives, we create meaningful change for the entire community. If you believe in justice and equality, share this story now. David's story is a profound lesson in fairness and personal responsibility. As the founder of Weston Financial, David dedicated his life to building a bank that would serve everyone, regardless of their skin color, background, or appearance. Yet, when he faced discrimination within his own organization, instead of giving up, David chose to confront the problem head-on. He understood that mistakes can be corrected and that determination and patience could transform not only an individual, but an entire institution. The powerful message of this story is, fairness is not a distant dream. It is a determined commitment to creating an environment where everyone is respected. No matter who you are or where you come from, you deserve to be treated fairly. We cannot allow prejudice or discrimination to hinder our growth or that of those around us. It is by standing up and fighting against injustice that we create positive change for society. Through this story, I realized that care and perseverance can change not just one life, but an entire organization. No matter how great the mistakes, they can be corrected if we truly have the determination and the will to act. If this story has inspired you, don't forget to hit like, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe to the Toch Story channel for more inspiring and meaningful videos. Stay with us so you won't miss the next thought-provoking and motivational stories.